Hello and welcome to Theology Thursday. Today I want to tackle a subject that has been very heated and very divisive in many quarters and places, and that is the issue of the environment. Now, the reality is the modern environmental movement started in the late 60s and early 70s with the decline of the hippie movement. The whole, we're going to create the age of Aquarius and this utopia thing kind of began to fade, and those hippie dreams weren't realized. And so many of them turned to the environment as the cause for their life that they would be involved in. And one of the interesting things is that the environmentalist movement has set itself up to win no matter what. If there continue to be all kinds of environmental issues and global warming continues and all this kind of stuff, they'll say, see, we've been telling you, we've been warning you. If suddenly things level out, global temperatures drop a little bit, things seem to improve, see, we told you, we fixed it. I mean, no matter what happens, they've set themselves up to win. And so I do find that rather interesting, just to pick a cause that you know you're going to win no matter what the outcome. You can say, we've been warning you, or hey, we fixed it. They come out with a win. But what I want to talk about is actually Christians and how we relate to the environment and our responsibilities toward and considerations of the environment, the earth and the trees and the sky, water, and all that kind of thing. So there are a few things to think about. First of all, what is our place in creation? We are a part of creation. God didn't make everything in 6 days, wait a few months, and then make human beings. We are a part of the 6 days of creation. And so we are a part of our environment. There is a connection that we have with the environment because of that. And so I think we need to think about that, take that into consideration, that we have been part, in Genesis 1, we're a part of creation. At the same time, we are the apex of creation. Human beings were the last thing that God created. We get more description of the creation of Adam and Eve than we do of all the rest of creation combined. As a matter of fact, the creation of human beings is so significant that not only is it described on day 6 in Genesis 1, but the bulk of Genesis 2 is about the creation of man and woman and the institution of marriage and all that. That's how significant we are in the creation, that we are a part of it, but we also kind of sit at the apex. Now, we're told in Genesis 2 that we are supposed to help take care of the creation. And here's the way that it's described. Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. And the word keep is the idea of guard. Same word used for guard or preserve, watch over, secure, any of those kind of things. And so that is, we're supposed to preserve the environment. We do have a responsibility biblically to work and to preserve the creation that God has put us in charge of. And so we're part of creation, but we also have a responsibility to it that we are supposed to work it and to keep it. There is something interesting about the environment that most people never even consider. God put Adam in the garden, not in a house, not in an apartment, not in a condo. Put him in the garden. We actually were designed to live outside, to be out as a part of the elements. But you have to remember that the initial creation was good. And so we don't have the dangers of creation initially. That's the result of sin. And so we live in houses as a result of sin. Not a direct result, like we sinned, so now we have to live in a house. But remember, Adam and Eve were naked. They didn't even wear clothing. Like, clothing is the result of sin because our eyes were open and we understood that we were naked. And so what we discover is that really we're designed to be outside. And I think that's why outside fresh air just makes us feel healthier. You talk about people that are, outdoors people almost always seem to be healthier. And I think one of the reasons for that is because that's how we were designed by God, is to be a part of this creation, to live outside in the midst of creation. And so I just thought I'd point that out because that is, I think, something that is interesting. Now, because sin is in the world, the Bible talks a lot about the dangers that we face in creation. As a matter of fact, there's more discussion probably in the Bible about the dangers that our environment presents to us than there are about anything else connected to the environment. So, for example, Genesis 6 through 9, God uses the environment to punish the world for its iniquity, and he sends the flood. And the environment is radically changed as a result of that. The surface of our earth is changed. It's terraformed by the flood. Things would never be the same after that. There were many environmental consequences that lasted for hundreds of years, and even to this day are still remnants of the catastrophe of the flood of Genesis 6 through 9. It's sedimentary rock that covers all over the planet, gorges and canyons that were carved right after the flood while all this sedimentation was still soft. And there was only one ice age, and it followed the flood because of how much humidity there was, and there were warm oceans at this point, producing a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, which when it got in, came up over mountains, things were cold, dropped tremendous amounts of snow and ice, and covered great swaths of the earth with ice, and of course has been receding ever since. Earthquakes, volcanoes, many of these things in many places are post-flood, and so the environment is very dangerous. I mean, God used it, and there are many consequences of God's judgment that we see in the environment. You think about David, he had to wrestle a bear and a lion. There are very dangerous animals, poisonous snakes and spiders and wild animals. As a matter of fact, the Bible has a distinction between wild animals and domesticated animals. The King James uses the word cattle for all domesticated animals. And so even recognize that distinction, but the dangers of being out in the wild. You remember Joseph. His father assumed that he had been attacked and killed by a wild animal when the brothers presented the torn and bloodied robe. Of course, they were trying to trick their dad. They're the ones that had torn it. But because the environment is so dangerous, they were aware of that, and they just assumed, Jacob just assumed that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. In Psalm 121, the Bible says, look to the hills. Where does my help come from? I look to the hills, and where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Well, why are you concerned about having help when you look at the hills? Because as you were working up through the hills, up through the wilds on the way to Jerusalem, there are all kinds of dangers that you faced. In Job and in Habakkuk, God is in the whirlwind, which is a tornado. That's what a whirlwind is. Our environment's a very dangerous place, very dangerous. Floods, violent storms, windstorms, which of course we get here in Arizona, very violent windstorms. You have tornadoes, and you have hurricanes, and we have volcanoes, and then wild animals. And our environment's it's a dangerous place. And so we recognize those dangers. I think the passage that helps us understand our relationship to the environment the most is Psalm 29. So I just want to move through it and see what it says. Is ascribe the Lord, O heavenly beings, ascribe the Lord glory and strength, ascribe the Lord the glory due his name, and worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. Then we get these statements, the voice of the Lord. You find it in verses 3, 4, 5. You find it again in verse 7, again in verse 8, again in verse 9. Let's repeat, the voice of the Lord. So what is the voice of the Lord? In this passage, it's thunder. This is booming thunder. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The glory of God thunders. The Lord over many waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. Then verse 5 says, the voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. He makes the Lebanon skip like a calf and Syrian like a young wild ox. So here's what we have. Here's a map of the land. And what we find is the voice of the Lord's over the waters. The storm starts in the Mediterranean. And now it moves inland over Lebanon. Then we're going to get it move again. It's going to move south. So in verse 7, the voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire, that's lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. That's down here. And so you find the storm moves in, then moves down. And look how violent this storm is as it's described. Verse 9, it makes the deer give birth, strips the forest bare, and in his temple all cry glory. Now, why are people in the temple? The temple's made out of stone. And you're living in a stick hut or a wooden structure. Much safer to go to a stone building. And so they go to the temple for safety. Now, when they're there in the middle of the storm, they're reminded of the most violent and deadliest of all storms, the flood. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as king forever. May the Lord give strength to his people. Excuse me. May the Lord bless his people with peace. You're not going to wait a minute. If God was in charge of the flood, he's in charge of this storm. In other words, the storm shows the power of God, but remind us that God is more powerful than the storm. Now, here's why this passage is so important. Baal, the number one rival to the God of the Bible in biblical times, there's constant pull to Baal worship. There was a constant temptation to Baal worship. Baal was a storm god. So Psalm 29 tells us not only is God over the environment, God is over all other gods. He's the one in charge of it all. And so recognize that God made it, put us in charge of it, but God really ultimately is over all of it. So what do you and I do with the environment? Well, one, we should enjoy it. We should enjoy the beautiful world, but we never worship it. However, the Bible is very careful never to connect creation to worship. Very careful, because it's very easy to worship creation. So we can look at a beautiful sunrise, but it's God that we worship, not the sunrise. The creation is just to be enjoyed, and we can enjoy it. We can enjoy ice cream and donuts and whipped cream on everything. And we can enjoy beautiful sunrises and sunsets. We can enjoy the canopy of stars that we see at night. We can enjoy the beautiful mountains and the oceans and lakes and snowfall and all that kind of thing. We can enjoy creation, and I personally believe that we should enjoy creation. I think we also need to be responsible. We're supposed to keep it and to work it. We're supposed to be responsible. We don't litter. We don't just make a mess. God's made a world that is shockingly resilient, but we want to be careful and do our part to take care of it as well, but we don't worship the earth. It's not Mother Earth that we have to take care of. It is God's creation that we are taking care of. And so we can enjoy it. We can appreciate it. We do not worship it. We should take care of it. But we need to recognize that it is God's creation, and God made it for us to use. God didn't put Adam in the garden so that he could sit back and worship the trees. They were for him. They were fruit-bearing trees for Adam to eat. God made creation for us, and so we should take advantage of the creation. There are plenty of fuels that we can use. Our modern world is run by petroleum. You're probably watching this on a phone or a computer, which is almost exclusively made from petroleum. Everything plastic. Plastics come from petroleum. And so if it wasn't for oil, we wouldn't have plastic. And if it wasn't for plastic, we wouldn't have our modern world. And so using the creation for our benefit is a good thing. And probably the number one place we see this is with medication. Modern medicine is a result of us believing that we don't worship creation. We use it, but we use it responsibly for our benefit and the benefit of humanity. And so God has given it to us. We should use it, but we should use it responsibly. That's the kind of the way the Bible lays it out. And when we see creation, we see these powerful storms and things, it's to remind us that nothing is more powerful than God. In his temple, we cry out, holy, just as they did in Psalm 29. So I hope sometime, maybe today, you can get outside for a little bit and enjoy the beauty of this creation that God has given us. To use the creation God has given us, but to use it responsibly, to work it and to keep it, as God told him in Genesis 2. So God bless you. Have a great day.